Lessons Not Yet Learnt is a podcast that uncovers the costly mistakes that businesses keep making and how to finally move past them. Through storytelling, candid conversations, and expert perspectives, I'm on a mission to challenge outdated thinking, bring those overlooked lessons to the surface, and drive meaningful change, one story at a time. Hi, welcome to Lessons Not Yet Learned, the podcast where we go beyond the polished case studies and the tidy leadership quotes to uncover the real stories of missteps, messy progress, and the lessons that shape better business. I'm your host, Kiran Kachela, and today I want to talk about something that's really close to my heart, something I'm really passionate about, and something I go on about all the time like a broken record. It's a lesson that I've learned over the last 2 decades of working in transformation. The most brilliant strategy and the most cutting-edge technology are utterly useless if you cannot connect it with people and process. Now, that true convergence is a real craft. It's an art, and it's so often done wrong. I've seen the catastrophic impacts of this weaving failing to deliver innovation. And I can tell you now, it has ripple effects that go on for years and years. Now, I've got so many examples to share, but I'm actually going to go back to my early years in transformation because I have a great example. Back then, I was involved in a huge ERP system rollout for a large FTSE-listed global company. And this project was set to impact around 12,000 employees. And it promised to be transformative. It was going to transform inventory management, supply chain management, procurement, finance. It was going to be huge. And the company had invested millions of pounds to get this right. But beneath the surface, there was a silent disaster brewing. What was happening was you had this great tech team who were building this system and they were focusing on code and infrastructure, but they were building it in a vacuum. You had this operations team, super eager, and they were all working around whiteboards, developing process workflows, but they just assumed that the system would conform. And then you had the HR and training team, and they were called at the 11th hour and asked to develop training and roll it out across the company. But they didn't understand what was changing and what it actually meant for the people and their daily work. So they were all working in their own little kingdoms and nobody talked to one another. The weeks leading up to go live were frantic. There was this sense of tension that everybody felt and this unspoken dread that this was all going to go wrong. But everyone was too afraid to admit it because everyone had invested so much already to make it work. And then came Go Live weekend, a weekend where we had all hoped it would be a seamless transition. But instead, it was catastrophic. Transactions couldn't be processed. Data was wildly incorrect. The phone lines went off the charts and emails came in flurries. It was chaos. There was issues everywhere and it was causing turmoil across the supply chain. Now, the system technically worked, but it was just unusable. And so the blame game began and the poor program director who was trying to lead as a boss was sat there struggling because he hadn't acted as the link. So this wasn't a failure of technology. It wasn't a failure of process. And it wasn't a failure of people. It was a failure of connection. We did not see that thread weave throughout all of those different functions to make sure that it was a cohesive whole. Today, the magic bullet that I think we needed back then is threaded leadership. Something that I didn't know about back then, but I think would have helped avoid a lot of issues. I'm pleased to introduce my guest today, Abi, a product director from Deliveroo, who is a true pioneer in delivering innovation and the art of being that central thread across functions, bridging strategy to real-time customer innovation. And she does that in quite a critical environment. She's working in a live environment where mistakes have real-world consequences. She has experience in big, giant organizations like American Express and fast-paced environments like Deliveroo. So she's truly lived and breathed the challenges around making innovation land. So I'm really excited to explore threaded leadership with Abi today. So welcome, Abi.
Thank you for having me.
No, thanks for coming. So talk to me, what is threaded leadership?
So single-threaded leadership is a concept that I think Amazon created. And it's essentially a structure where you have one person across all the different functions. So you have a leader of a certain project, and that person might be from product, but they also look after the technology teams, the marketing teams, the strategy teams, all the teams that are required in order to get this project over the line. And it's something that we've adopted at Deliveroo. So I'm the single-threaded leader for loyalty, which means that I look after the technology teams, but also the marketing teams and the strategy teams together.
So is that like matrix management type approach internally? How does that work?
Yeah, so it's still matrix. So you still have your tech team, science team, you still have all the different functions, and they still all ladder up into their functional leadership. And you still have, the, I guess, diagonals in terms of the different areas. So like loyalty, restaurant strategy, etc. But for a specific thing that you really want to get over the line. So one of the things that I worked on was revamping the loyalty program, the subscription program. So, and that's Delivery Plus. So for revamping that program for a specific project that you need to get over the line, they have a leader that's threaded across all of the different functions. So you're still working within a matrix, but you have one leader across.
Amazing. And does that take a different style of leadership?
Yeah, I think so. I think because I'm not the expert in tech, and I'm not the expert in marketing, and I'm actually not an expert in any of the areas, but I'm expected to lead across the areas. You have to focus a lot more on how do you bring these different teams together, and you're not necessarily you're the connective tissue between the different areas rather than just the boss and kind of making all the decisions for each area. So you have to be able to balance the considerations, the legal consideration, the customer experience consideration, the finance considerations, and you are in the middle of it all, and you're expected to balance those considerations against each other.
That's really interesting. So you're as a leader, you're acting as a link, not the boss.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I assume that changes the whole team dynamic.
Yeah, it does. It means that you are still expecting to be challenged by each team. So you still have the in-app designers saying, we really need this to be right for the customer experience. So when we were launching Plus Diamond, which is the buy and bite only subscription tier for our best delivery customers. So when we were launching that, the experience and the branding and the marketing is really important. And the experience in the app is really important. And the customer service was really important. But we still had to balance that against the financials. And we still had to balance that against kind of what words can we use legally versus not legally. And so you still need to be able to listen to the considerations from the finance team, the considerations from the operations team who are saying, I know you want to be able to deliver this type of service, but we actually can't when it is, Friday night and everybody's on Deliveroo. There's only a certain amount of priority service that we're able to deliver. So you have to be able to listen to all the different areas and balance them off.
And you talked about this is a approach that has been adopted at Deliveroo. Were you involved in projects that didn't have the single-threaded leadership, whether that was at Deliveroo or prior? I know you worked at American Express as well.
Yeah. So at American Express, they didn't really have the same concept of single-threaded leadership. They didn't have this one leader that was in charge of on the hook, essentially, for delivering across all the different functions. But Amex was different in that it was already scaled. So they already had all of these processes in place. So a similar project would be revamping the Platinum card, for example. And, Amex is, I don't know, I think 100 and something years old. So they already have all of these processes in place that we didn't have at Deliveroo. So they already have, here are all the kind of like templates and processes and meetings and steps that you have to go through in order to revamp the Platinum card. And this is like the 100th time that we've revamped the Platinum card. And so part of my job was to bring some of that process to Deliveroo and from Amex, and to try and talk them through, okay, if you're actually going to pull together a new product, a new customer experience, you need to put these kind of processes in place. There are some projects that I've worked on where they didn't have a single threaded leadership approach. And actually the team at Deliveroo used to be split. So it used to be the tech team that ran part of the loyalty team and the commercial team. And I think they did a good job, but there was just a lot more, it was slower and there was a lot more friction between kind of the strategy owned by the technology team and the product team and the strategy that was owned by the commercial team. And so they were kind of running kind of in different directions, or when they ran together, there was always just a bit more friction.
Yeah, exactly. So, I've seen it so many times as well, that friction between teams because they're not all aligned or they're going off in different directions. And that's often catastrophic, isn't it? But so what you've essentially talked about, looking back at your experience at Amex as well as now at Deliveroo, you sort of need those key process frameworks and tools along with this approach of threaded leadership. And as a combination, they work quite well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the processes are really important. And somewhere like Deliveroo, where you're running really fast, and often we're doing things for the first time. So it's not things that we've done before. And that's one of the things that I love about Deliveroo is you're kind of you're innovating and you're trying new things out, and everything needs to be done really quickly. So especially in those environments, I think it's really important to be able to take a step back and just pause slightly to figure out, okay, does everybody know what we're actually trying to do? Is everybody aligned on the outcome that we're trying to create? Does everybody agree with the experience that we're trying to build? And often we kind of like, when you're running really fast, you just skip over that stuff. And then halfway through the project, everybody has a different understanding of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and I've seen it again so many times. We don't stop, we don't pause, we're just running. And in that time, everyone's just going off, scattering in their own little directions. Do you pause just at the start of a project? Are you pausing throughout the project?
Yeah, so we've tried to have a structure that I copied from Amex, which is around having a kickoff meeting where you have everybody that needs to be involved so that everybody understands the brief and the type of experience that you're trying to build. So we often have a designer who has put together the kind of experience in the app, and then what kind of emails everybody will receive and what the order will kind of look like when it arrives at the customer. So we have a video that we put together to just get everybody on the same page in terms of what the experience looks like. We do that at the beginning, but given the environment and the industry, if you're running even just a 9-month project, lots of things change during that time. And so lots of things change externally, but also lots of things change internally. And so when things change for one group, it's easy to be like, okay, well, let's just let them deal with that. And then the other groups kind of just keep going. But actually, it's important to reconnect and realign and talk about, okay, are we still going after the same thing? Has it changed slightly? Are the timelines all still right, etc.? So, and I think this is where the processes really come into play.
I think you're so right. People often think to get to A to B is a single straight line, or they'll design a project plan based on this straight line approach, thinking it's all going to go to plan. And the reality is things do change, and I'm a big fan of making sure we keep to scope and we don't get scope creep. But we do have to appreciate, especially in such a fast-paced environment, things change throughout that time that you're trying to land an innovation. And so, reconnecting and realigning and making sure that we sort of get the rhythm right across the teams is so important. So are you working in short sprints?
Yeah, so we work in 2-week sprints, which is, I think, best practice, I think, in product and tech. But in product and tech, they're running on 2-week sprints. In the restaurants business and the operations business, they might be running on different sprints and different timelines. So, for example, if we're building a certain proposition, and if we need certain restaurant partners to come on board, then the sales cycle is slightly different. It's like a completely different timeline to go out and talk to the different partners, sign them on, negotiate the contract terms, etc. During that whole time, the tech teams are just assuming that the partners are going to come on board. And they're also just assuming that the operations teams are going to be able to deal with whatever it is. But actually, to your point earlier about things changing, even though the tech team are running in 2-week sprints, we need to be able to adapt when someone comes back and says, actually, that partner that we were expecting, they're not going to come on board. Or actually, that partner that we signed up, they have really bad operations. They've only got 3 ovens and we want to make this many lasagnas or whatever. And so we're not going to have as much, we're not going to be able to supply as much as the demand. And so you have to kind of adjust the plans in flight. So yes, we run in 2-week sprints. And that's to make sure that we're agile and we're able to adapt. But we're also, once we launch something into the wild, we have to be really responsive. You can't wait 2 weeks because the operations teams will be like, this is how much demand we're seeing and we can't supply it, or this is the percentage of bad customer experiences that are happening, like missing items or cold food, etc. And you have to be able to adapt really quickly because otherwise you'll lose that business and they won't order with you the next weekend or even the next day.
The environment that you're having to land innovation in is quite unique, really, because it's just so live. The changes you make have an immediate impact. You're basically building the plane while flying it. So what does that look like for you?
Yeah, I think this is the biggest thing that was different from Amex for me, is that when you're building customer propositions at Amex, you kind of have time to build it, test it, launch it. You still need to launch something that's extremely high fidelity and that works. But I think there's fewer things or edge cases that you hadn't thought of, things that could go wrong. Whereas at Deliveroo, every lunchtime and dinner time, Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays are when all of the kind of volume hits the business. And so you have to do your best to try and work out, okay, what are all the things that could possibly go wrong? But you actually just don't know until it's in the network what some of these edge cases are that happen and then things go wrong. So you have to be able to try and kind of do all of the what if scenarios. So if this happens, then we'll, do these things, but also just be super adaptive in the moment. We have, because we're a technology company, we have engineers and product people who are on call. So they're on call like over the weekends and things. And so if something goes wrong, we can usually get the right person to make some decisions about what to do differently. But it is definitely a much more high pressure environment when you're launching something, or even just generally when you're running the business because of the intensity of the live operating environment.
I can imagine. And I guess, those what if scenarios, it really helps with the threaded leadership approach, because often we can be so siloed and have our own assumptions of what might go wrong. But it's only when you start to work with every function and understand the what if scenarios from each perspective that you get a really good broad understanding rather than just your own perspective.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And I think that's something that I've definitely learned a lot more of at Deliveroo, these functions that I didn't really understand in a lot of detail. That come and challenge me on, what we're trying to do. And then it just really helps open up your mind to like, oh, there's all these different things that make the business work together. And all these things need to come together in order to just to deliver some food, which you think would be straightforward, but isn't. And yeah, so you're definitely right.
So have you got an example? I mean, you've talked about this really critical environment, very live, active environment that you're having to land change in, and your critical role as a threaded leadership. Have you got an example of a project that hasn't gone to plan?
Yes, I remember when we were working at Amex on a proposition. It was a youth proposition, and this was a long time ago. But we were working on a proposition. We went through the normal steps that you go through, which is, you talk to the customers, you try and find out, okay, what's missing? How could we serve your needs, etc. You do all the branding kind of work, like what is the card going to look like? What are the benefits going to be? How much is it going to cost? How many people do you think you'll get? And we went and we ticked all of the boxes. And I think the youth card, and this was going to launch in the US, was kind of ready to go, and we did a soft launch, and just nobody got approved. No one got approved for the card. So everyone came in, tried to sign up, and the legal team were like, yeah, I mean, we just don't have the risk and regulation team were like, we just don't have the data on such a young card member to be able to approve them for this level of product. It was such a simple thing that you probably could have worked out in the first week of this, 9-month project. And if that specific team had been involved, or if the person in charge had thought about it a little bit more, then we would have just known, but we didn't know. And we were like, okay, none of these people are going to get approved. So
something that was so easily avoidable, but because we didn't have the threaded leadership approach of someone being able to make sure we were connecting all of these different functions, it's exactly the example I've shared earlier. It's such a common mistake where we don't engage with the right teams about the right things at the right times.
Yeah.
And there's a disconnect. So that's the example. And what about in this very live environment? I mean, what happens when you roll something out and something doesn't go right? Do you have a rollback process of some sort, or?
Yeah. So on the features, so if there's, any kind of features that we develop, so for example, priority delivery or different pricing features, we have the way that the tech team roll things out is that we'll roll something out to 10%, see if it works. We'll roll something out, then if nothing goes wrong, then to 50 and then to 100. And so what's helpful is that once you've rolled it out to 10%, if you start seeing some issues, you can roll it back and then roll it out to 10 to 50. You start seeing some issues, roll it back. So that's how we deal with, in the live environment, rolling things out and then rolling them back. We roll them back and then fix them and then roll them out again. Where that's slightly more difficult to do is if there is marketing attached to the rollout. So if it's just a feature that we're rolling out and there's not a massive billboard or a TV advert about it, it's totally fine. You can do that approach. And that is what mostly we do. But if there's a feature that you're rolling out and you've got you've bought out all the billboards in London and it's going on the radio and it's going on the TV, then you can't do that. And so we try our very best so we're launching a feature in September and the marketing is happening in October. So we'll try our best to just give the tech team a bit of time to kind of roll it out, roll it back and try and fix it. But the pressure is on, it has to work because you've already bought the TV ads. And so the normal tech approach needs to be adapted slightly to accommodate commercial and marketing teams.
And again, that's where this single-threaded leadership is just so critical, isn't it? You must be quite data-led in terms of being able to monitor that data to understand consumer behaviour.
Yeah, absolutely. When we relaunched the loyalty program last year, we have a whole work stream just on data and dashboards. And this is, again, where it helps to have all the different teams, because I will say to them, okay, what do you want to know on the first day that this launches? What's really important for you to know? What do you want to be measuring? And you need that from every team. And then they all bring that together. And then you build whatever the data tracking, monitoring dashboards are that are required. And then on top of that, on the day that it launches, there's kind of live dashboards where you're basically measuring every single person that applies for the subscription, every single person that kind of goes through the funnel, where they're dropping off, so that you can kind of live spot, is there something that's broken between this thing that they click on the app and then where they're getting approved? Are the payments going through properly? So you're looking at the whole customer flow in loads of detail. Now, after the first couple of weeks, you can kind of relax a little bit and not look at it in so much detail, but the data is still all there and is still all being tracked by the teams.
As you say, the number one thing to start with there is, what do we want to measure? Yeah, well, what question are we trying to answer here? What are we trying to look at? So it's so key. You earlier talked about, I guess in your example, you shared a bit around your ecosystem. You're so reliant on the supply chain. It's not just Deliveroo. You've got this whole supply chain you have to work with. So how do you navigate that with threaded leadership?
With a really good understanding of the people that you need to evolve in each project and the processes that you need to be able to put together. So if I give an example, if I go back to Plus Diamond, we had priority delivery on every order, which is the pricing team making sure that we can get priority delivery on every order. You have the operations team who have to deliver it on priority for every order. We then had a ring-fenced care team. So that's the care team had to set up their own, like a ring-fenced team to answer all the questions for these priority members. You then had exclusive restaurants. And so there was couple of salespeople going out to exclusive Michelin-starred restaurants to sign them up and bring them on board and make sure that they stay on board, because as you launch the proposition, you can't have those partners kind of drop out. And so you kind of go through in your head and you're like, okay, so we need the ops team, the pricing team, the sales team, and then there's all angles of marketing. So because it's marketing we need influencers, we need the branding team, we need to decide kind of what's the kind of imagery that we're going to use and what kind of language are we going to use. And so all of the different marketing teams, all the different channels, acquisition channels that we might need to go through. And then you always need legal and legal, regulation, compliance, those guys. And then, finance, just to make sure that you kind of understand exactly how the different decisions that you're making in the app impact the P&L, which tech teams historically are not so great at, which is why they have been connected with the commercial teams to kind of make sure that they're thinking about the financials as well as making sure that the tech works.
Yeah, and again, I mean, my experience of working with tech teams, they're so technically skilled and gifted, but there is a disconnect almost in language and translation sometimes, isn't there? Everyone's speaking a different language, essentially, in the business. You've got the finance talking about numbers and financials, and you've got the tech team talking about code and infrastructure. And so does the threaded leadership role have to be the translator?
Yeah, absolutely. Because you can get, when you're building a customer proposition, you can kind of get it both ways. So you could get the design team and the product team have come up with this absolutely beautiful experience that just costs way too much money. Or you get it the other way around, where kind of maybe a strategy and finance team has come up with a proposition that you cannot translate into the app, i.e. whatever it is that they've come up with makes sense in a spreadsheet. But when you actually try and translate the customer flow into an app, it just doesn't work, because you've only got a certain number of pixels to explain to someone what they need to do. They're actually trying to just order their dinner. And so you can't distract them too much. You have to get them all the way through the flow and also communicate whatever the proposition is. And these are kind of like the fundamental differences between the teams in their mental models. And single threading means that I have to be able to translate the financials to the product and tech teams, and I have to be able to translate the in-app experience to the strategy and finance teams, so that we can then find the right kind of compromises between the two that work the best.
Absolutely, yeah. Almost like not a negotiator, but yeah.
Yeah, I definitely feel like a negotiator.
So you're having to act as this translator internally, but you're also having to respond to constant changes in customer behavior. Are there any really interesting or influential consumer behaviors that you've seen that you're like having to pivot?
Great question. I think, one of the things that has changed recently is the way that we do research. So we use a lot more AI in our research. So before, you would have to do kind of traditional quantitative research surveys, and then you could only do a certain number of in-depth surveys. But now, because of AI, we can do a lot more in-depth surveys. We can run like 300 in-depth surveys in the time that we would usually only run like a couple. And the in-depth survey is really where you get to like the nuggets of human behavior and kind of what drives people. And also, interestingly, when they do it with an AI, they're a lot more honest, because they're not worried about offending you. So I found that the research coming through is much more insightful, which is helpful, because it's really the only thing that we've got to prepare us for what's actually going to happen. And even that is not really good enough because, people say things, but then they don't actually do what they say. And the environment that they're in is kind of different to when they're being interviewed. And then you have interview bias. So the research is getting better because of AI. And I think some really interesting things that have happened that we were not expecting are with food, the experience is really emotional. So a lot of sometimes people are just trying to, have their breakfast, lunch, but with Deliveroo, it's usually, a treat occasion or, you're really tired and you've come home from work. It's actually quite emotional. And so we think people want a certain type of food or they want a certain type of experience, but actually they think they want that as well. But actually they just want something completely different. So I remember when we first launched the AI concierge, I think it was 2 years ago. And it's a proposition where you can talk to the AI and be like, inspire me or tell me what I should eat. And it's kind of based on absolutely everything that you've ordered before, all of the order ratings. It's looking at all of the order ratings of the restaurants that are in your area that you can order from. It's looking at all of the dish reviews, everything. And it essentially is meant to be able to logically tell you what to order. But you would get someone who comes in and they're like, oh, I really want something healthy. Like they're prompting the AI with, I want something healthy because I want to stay within my macros for this week. And then they just go on to order a McDonald's and you just think, because people are emotional and their physical experience is so connected to food. That actually even what they think and what they do and what they feel is just very different.
And so even with AI, that can be quite difficult because you can't really tap into emotions in the same way as you say, you can ask, what do you fancy? I fancy something healthy, but actually I don't. I fancy a Mackie D's. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fascinating. So threaded leadership, is there anything in your career history that has helped you become that effective threaded leadership role? Because it's clearly a very critical role and quite a complex role and requires a lot of skill.
Thank you. I think I've always really been interested in doing lots of different roles. So I started my career at American Express and I started in the strategy team, but then then I moved into a sales role, and then every 2 years I kind of moved and did a different type of role. So I was always interested in understanding lots of different sides of the business, and I've had a little bit of experience in lots of areas, but not much depth in any one area. So when I came to Deliveroo and I understood that actually this was going to be a strength, because I didn't have to have very in-depth experience in any one area, because I had some marketing experience, I'd had some brand experience, had some sales experience, had some product experience. And so actually that was quite helpful. So I think that's quite helpful. I think it's also, even if you don't have all those different types of experiences, the thing that's really important is the ability to listen and to empathize. So if you are the product person and you are single-threaded across the commercial team, you have to spend time with the commercial team understanding and listening, because they have a completely different set of mental models to you that you don't understand. And the other way around, if you're a commercial person and then suddenly you're single-threaded across a product team, you have to spend a lot of time with product leaders, product teams, kind of upskilling yourself. And so I think it's about having that, humbleness to the other functions that you don't necessarily fully understand, and taking the time to really listen and understand.
I couldn't agree more. I think we often think everyone thinks like us.
Yeah.
And that's not the reality, is it? And I think as humans, we are clouded by our own assumptions, our own experiences, and we think we know it all based on our experience, based on our knowledge. And actually, there's so little we know, because the reality is everyone's got a different piece of the puzzle. They're all looking at it from different perspectives, thinking about things differently. And so you're absolutely right. Actually going and listening and going and understanding is so key. Doesn't matter which role you're in. So I love that. So that's all been so insightful. For our audience today, can you share What's your one lesson that you feel we've not yet learnt?
I think the one lesson that we keep failing to learn is getting everybody to agree on what it is that we're trying to achieve. And it sounds so simple. And I feel like we come out of every project with that lesson. And yet we still go into projects with people not agreeing on what the outcome is going to be and taking that time at the beginning to get all the functions together on what are we actually trying to achieve here. So the clarity on the outcome across all functions.
Define it. It's all about defining it. It's we have a 3-step process at CI Projects: define it, improve it, sustain it. And I put so much emphasis on define it. It's all about making sure we're really clear where we're heading and why, and making sure everyone's aligned. So I couldn't agree more. And that's clearly been a significant magic ingredient for you guys in your success and constant innovation. So thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
The CI Fix from today's episode is all about making sure all key representatives are heard, that we're talking to all the different departments involved in a transformation. And that starts from defining it. Actually defining what we're doing, why we're doing it, who it impacts, and making sure everybody is involved in the entire journey. And we need to weave this thread throughout every department to make sure there is absolute cohesion. Thank you for joining today's episode, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one.